Welcome to Tattered Capes, where we explore the best of aging opportunities and the potential they hold for our future in a fun, meaningful, and engaging format.
Even though our capes might be a bit tattered, the superhero in all of us has a lot more resilient living to do. Catherine Owens is the owner of CLO Consulting, a trusted aging well authority and advisor in innovative senior living solutions.
I'm joined by Scott Fulton, longevity expert and owner of Home Ideations, a national leader in living environment design.
Welcome to the show. I'm Scott Fulton. Today, Catherine and I are joined by Jo Saavedra, author of Eldercare 101. It's an updated version from her first popular edition that came out, I think, in around 2016. Several updates and a lot of rewrites in this, but our conversation really gets at what are really the positive things that we can all be thinking about, whether it's for ourselves or for our parents, and really, I think, a view that gives us some things to look forward to. It's a really positive conversation. Jo is just a wealth of information, and it's just an honor to have her here. Enjoy the show. Hello, Catherine. How are we today?
We are fantastic, Scott. How are you?
Good, and I'm excited because we have a guest with us today. Guess
Yes.
who?
You know, I'm really excited too, and I'm going to guess it's Jo that you've been speaking so highly of.
Yes, Jo Saavedra is with us today, folks, and Jo, welcome to the show. It's great to have you, and maybe you can tell the story of how you and I connected, because I think that's just a fun little introduction.
Oh, fun. Thank you, Scott. And Catherine, thank you also for having me. It's such an honor to be with both of you today. I love the work that you're doing in the field, and just a privilege to be speaking with you and talking with you about ideas and batting things around. So Scott, wow, the way we met, so much of what you do online, especially within your LinkedIn posts, and are such an asset to all of us in the field of this aging landscape, longevity landscape, as well as those kind of peeking in from the outside, can get a real applied approach by just being present to you on LinkedIn. And so when it came time to update Eldercare 101, the publishers had asked me to get that updated since it had had a good first run on the first edition. I immediately thought of you. And I thought of all the work that you're doing around aging in space, which is a topic so near and dear to my heart. And reaching out to you and having that conversation was just not only fun and exciting to get to know you as a colleague, but also because of the work that you're doing really tapped into my interests, which within home building and spirituality and end of life and caregiving and those important topics that we're all concerned with, but that are definitely vital to Eldercare 101 updated and the tools that we provide there. So thank you for taking my call and getting on board and becoming part of that project with me, because I think that collaboration has just made a really rich experience for the readers. And Catherine, I'm so excited to have that expanded now with your voice as well. So thank you.
Absolutely. And just thrilled to get to learn more about you and hear your story and really what has motivated all of the work that you do.
Thank you. Thank you.
I know, Jo, when you reached out to me, I can recall the response was something like, I don't have time for this, but I'm going to make time for it because I felt it was really important. I didn't know you. I knew you by reputation at the time. And my view of the need in this area is clear that we need more voices. And I think that's part of it, right? Not just louder voices. We need those too. But the more people we have kind of bringing their thoughts to the conversation, I think is good for everybody. So it was an honor to be able to contribute to it. So let me go back and kind of ask, I think it's a great question when we think about elder care. It is such a massive topic. It covers so many aspects of life. how did you find yourself in there kind of at its, because you went to school for it, right? And kind of how did that all come to you as a place you decided you wanted to invest your time and your emotion and obviously your career?
Oh, thank you for asking. It is really near and dear to my heart. It started with my mom. Actually, it started at birth, right? We have all these influences in our life, and I was born in the Silicon Valley. I worked in high tech in my life, and I was also, grew up in the shadow of a Carmelite monastery. So this spiritual practices were really relevant in my life. So between that innovation, I was in a large family. So the basic roots were all set there. My intersection is definitely in that compassion and innovation, and then that family unit that aging takes place in. And so what got me started into it is I went back to school to get my master's in healthcare administration. And I had a high-tech career and wanted to move out of business in that arena and get into a new arena. And as I was going through my first term, I quickly realized I didn't want to go back for hardcore business. I wanted to go more into the practicing arts. And so I took off into gerontology. It was a passion I'd had. I thought it would be something I'd do later down the road in life, right? Like so many of us think. And so with a good advisor, I moved that up significantly in my timeline, went back to school for business gerontology. So a very unique field. There were only 40 of us at the time in the world, and not that it was all that important, but it was emerging. And so it was kind of a geeky field, not too many people in there yet. So as I was finishing my 3-year degree, which was a thesis degree, the last 6 months, my mother had had a fall, and my older sister at the time, they both went down. Went to separate hospitals. All the siblings and I kind of rushed into the situation. And being a gerontologist, you would think you would have, caregiving in the bag, and we don't learn anything about caregiving.
Right.
So I was at a loss. So right away, my mom came to me to be with me to take care of. And my sister went with her older son, and then my 3 brothers surrounded us with all that great family support. It really was the catalyst, because for 6 months before her death, she had Alzheimer's disease. It was chaos. It was every day going home in tears and having my brother, one of my brothers or all of them, coaching and supporting me through the love of this. Just watching that debilitation and finding resources. And my business hat was on in the background going, why am I reinventing a wheel that everyone uses every day? There has to be something here I can do. And so after the death of my mother, she had a beautiful death, as much as that can happen in a crisis situation, but she was surrounded by family. So it was beautiful in that aspect. I took time to recover. I graduated 2 weeks later, and I thought, okay, I'm pivoting. I'm going out of strictly business and back into the gerontology world and cracking this nut of aging life care management. And so I did. I spent 2 years getting that certification. It's a little bit like a CPA degree or certification, in the sense 2,000 hours you sit for your boards. And these are the professionals. I'd never heard of them. I learned about them through a colleague. And these are the professionals that grab you by the neck, pull you out of the water so that you can breathe while you're going through caregiving and even life planning to some smaller extent. So the love of my mom, the culmination of my background, my professional background, and then stepping into the call of filling this gap that was in the market really brought me full front and center to life planning, caregiving, and being present to those applied needs. I get to take all the great research that all the gerontologists and scientists are doing out there and figure out how to boil them down, connect the dots, and make them digestible for my clients. So.
And I think that's when I come back to, that's probably for Catherine and I, because Catherine, she has so much experience working in that older adult environment as well, and she's seen so many cases, right? But as all of us, I think, certainly the people I work alongside with, it's this common mission of how do we distill it down in language and tools and basic skill sets that people can learn quickly and put to use that will make a big difference in their lives and those of their families, right?
So Mary Jo, I loved what you just shared. You said stepping into the call. And, we were talking prior to this call, and you had mentioned that, you necessarily weren't the expert by any means or the only expert. And when you said that, it made me think of so many times you meet people in this industry, myself included, that got here not by accident, but not through the traditional route. And so, your path to get to where you are was probably not your first decision or the traditional, but I remember early on thinking that I was meant to be a voice of change in this industry. And when you said that, I think that's why certain people align, is when you realize that there are change makers, there are people that want to do it better, there are people that recognize that things can be done differently, to really make that experience for those that are caring for someone and being cared for just so much better. And so I love that, just stepping into the call. And so thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Yeah, it is a call. It is something that, I really came out of that experience with my mom exhausted, school, of course, as well, but understanding that, wow, there just has to be a better way, and it wouldn't let go of me. So it wasn't a choice. It was very much thrusted on me. So stepping up to that call was really a passion to do in honor of my mom. So I think, like you say, a lot of people in our line of work have those personal motivations that don't let go of them. Yeah.
I had a mentor one time. I was training someone and they said, Catherine doesn't drink the Kool-Aid, she is the Kool-Aid. And so I think, you meet people like Scott and like you, and it isn't drinking the Kool-Aid, we are the Kool-Aid. And I know that's just such a simplistic way to put it, but it is that drive, commitment, true sense of purpose, and ownership in the work that you're doing for others.
Yeah,
and I think that's really when we think about adult children, right? There is no choice in terms of they don't want anyone else to do it. Not that they look forward to doing it, but there's this calling that I think a lot of adult children feel, right? And so that to me is that what your work and what I've seen you do with your book as well is those are really the ones that you're serving. And so maybe it kind of brings me back to the question of why write the book, the first one that you did a few years ago.
Sure. At that time, it really was that business decision to know that I could actually make a small difference. Even if it was just my family who bought the book, I knew it was out there connecting dots, and hopefully people that had even bigger brains than me for this profession could take those dots that I had helped connect and do something even more meaningful with them. So, through my private practice, I was really exposed to this natural tension that exists between caregivers and those that have to be cared for. And in the essence of an elder, and I do want to give a little caveat here, because I often get, well, I'm not elderly. So elderly is almost a naughty word in our longevity community. It's a word that's a bit of an insult. I've never seen it used in a people try and use it positively. But elder it is a respected role within your family, within your community, within life, that you have achieved something that not everybody gets to achieve. So just as that caveat, thank you. But going into the first book was really the toolbox for me, allowing adult children, allowing spouses, allowing friends who could step in and have the resources, but understand that the person they're caregiving for, no matter what condition they are in, they have the right to autonomy. And so how do you bring like an adult child who constantly struggles with wanting to keep their parents safe, with an adult who wants to make their own decisions? And, you know, there's just not stay out of my business, but don't be heavy-handed trying to tell me what to do. Both are coming from a place of love and importance. But there's this sweet spot in the center. And I think the closer we can get people to that respect on both sides, you know, as elders, we have to look objectively and strongly at our choices, how we plan for our future. If we put off planning and grappling with those hard questions, then we're left in crisis. And after having a practice of supporting people in crisis, I knew I could do more on the prevention end, which is what moved me into my role today. But getting back to that first book, it really was the tools to help you grapple with questions like, well, what should I do to give up my keys so they're not taken away? What are my choices? How long can I extend my driving years? You know, basic things like that, that older adult children just come to, it brings them to their knees as they're caring for their parents. So a lot of these different tools were easy to identify and much harder to create the clever scenarios using all of your holistic approach of tools to resolve. And so Eldercare 101, the first book, really helped able to do that. It was that toolbox where you don't really read it cover to cover, you dive into each topic as you need it. And being the 6 pillars of aging well-being, it's very specific. There's a legal, there's a financial, social, medical, spiritual, and then of course your home life, your home. So you could easily pop in there and get the tools that you want, which are so important when you're in crisis. You don't have time to read a book. And then on the flip side of that, as a planner, you could really dive in there and be thoughtful about it and make those decisions for yourself so that, number one, other people aren't making them for you, or God forbid you don't do your legal work and the state makes those decisions for you, right? So hopefully, you know, I achieved a lot of those goals with that first book. And I think now doing the second book, that material is trusted and it is being proven out time and time again. So
as you, Catherine's got a question waiting, but I just wanted to just throw in something here, which I think is really probably unique about what you've written and what you speak about is that, and I give colleagues a bit of a hard time about this now, is, you know, we all beat the public over the head. You need to do more planning. You need to do more planning. What? Plan what? Specifically, tell me what to do. Tell me I need to plan more without giving me specifics is not helpful. And so to you, just I applaud you for it. Is you have so many very specific things to do and places to go to get things done. And if there's a gap in all of the work that all of us are doing, that to me has been a place because we know this stuff, and so we kind of skip over it because, but that's to everyone's loss. So okay, Catherine, I'm sorry I interrupted you. I'm going to be quiet.
You know what, Scott, I get used to it. So Scott and I have this tension. You talk about adult kids and their adult, their parents, but, you know, simplifying it and getting people to have the conversation. Sometimes and to your point, Scott, you're right. I got that out. But people don't know what conversation they should be having. And we say, you know, all of us are trying to get people to be more proactive in their planning, proactive in their conversations, in their thought processes. And oftentimes they don't know. And so to Scott's point, if they don't even know what they should be doing, one of the very first questions I ask people when they come to me, and typically, as you, it sounds like you've seen, it's that emergency or the crisis. And so that's why we all do what we do, is to try and get people to avoid that and truly take control. But I just ask people, what is the decision you're trying to make? Because sometimes they don't even know. They just know that their current situation isn't working, and they don't even know what they should be asking, or the conversations, or where to even begin. And so I love that your book it encompasses so many things, but it can just pinpoint one thing, because we were talking about stories and how powerful they are. And one of the things that really motivated a lot of what I do is seeing the commonality in so many people's decision process and situations, yet understanding that they're all individual in the details and how they make decisions as a family, how they have conversations as a family, that spiritual motivation, just all of those things that are unique, but also are happening so consistent with everybody else. And so for me, I always felt like that was one of those sweet spots. And so to be able to write a book like that touches on the individual struggles, yet encompasses the full picture, is just an incredible thing.
Thank you so much. I mean, I think you really hit on a topic that's so important to me when putting those pieces together. Being able to pinpoint it is so important, but also the complexity. It's really easy to pick up any book and be overwhelmed by all the good things you should do, right? But when we apply it, and like you say, when we can tease out the pinpoints that are important to us, what happens is you realize there's a string attached behind what you're looking at that's important, and it leads somewhere else. And so in the case of Eldercare 101, it leads to another pillar. And so it's really set up in a way that if Scott is telling you in the home environment chapter what to do about making a decision as to whether mom or dad should, go into a facility environment or stay at home, or what it is they need, it's immediately going to direct you over to other questions and other pillars that you need to consider as well. So it helps you with those stepping stones of being applied. But overarching, I have to tell you, spirituality is key to absolutely every decision you make in life. We don't call it that, but that essence, right? What is your purpose as a caregiver? What is your purpose as an elder? And understanding your elder, if you are a caregiver, understanding their purpose and really what feeds them. It's not that one end all be all thing that we all can't get our arms around what we're supposed to do with our life, right? But it's that reason, like Dan Butner says, how you get out of bed in the morning. What's getting you up and going? And so if you can unlock that and understand the person you're caring for, that's going to be a good starting place to enter into the spirituality of decision making. It's meaning.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, resilience.
So many times, and so a lot of my background is really training people on how to support families, caregivers, seniors, professionals supporting seniors and families, how to train them on how to support them through the decision process. And it's always interesting to me, because we care so much, we want to be solution oriented. We want to say, just do this, I promise, and it's going to help, because we've seen it benefit others. And the ability to step back, and to the spirituality point, people call it all different things, but one of the follow-up questions that I love to use with almost any scenario is, why is that important to you? And it's, whether it's, losing a pharmacy license, because that was your identity, or taking away the keys, or, I tell Scott, I've told this story about a gentleman that wouldn't move without the table he made. And why is the table important to you? And that's when the stories come out and the motivating reasons and the drive and the heart of what is going on. And so for me, it's don't just rush to that answer, but understand, because to your point, it's going to take you to the different pillars, and it's going to, I always say everything has a motivating reason. And if you can find out the motivating reason behind why, it really will help you truly help the family and the caregiver.
Yeah, I think that's where your work, Catherine, really gives all of us permission to dive into those conversations and have the tools to be able, not just tools, but the confidence really to be able to open up and have tough discussions and find the silver linings in them, because a lot of these conversations are hard. You know, I once had a conversation with one of my clients. It was for a friend who referred their nephew to me. And we started our conversation. His mother had had a fall. She'd gotten a new dog, and she was out walking the dog, and the dog saw a cat, and of course took off and brought her down to the ground, unfortunately, and she hit her head. And she laid there for a little bit before a neighbor came along and helped her back into her home, wanted to call, you know, the doctors or take her in. She wouldn't hear of it. And she went into the home. He came back and went in, the neighbor came back and went to the door, and the door was locked, couldn't raise a response, called the fire department. So it was quite an ordeal. She had gone into a coma and was entered into the hospital. And 7 weeks later, I get the call of advanced care that is needed, and very few places offering the type of care that they needed. And so it ended up quickly, the conversation, as I asked those pointed questions, you know, what is important to you? What do you see, and what are you feeling? Two brothers out of state, him alone navigating this. And we immediately went into a spiritual conversation that had very little to do with care management. And it was that vulnerability of making decisions, you know, asking pointed questions like, what is your mom's body telling you at this point? What is your heart telling you? And what do you need to do? So those questions are huge. He was able to make peace by going through that process, brought his brothers in, and they made the decision together for hospice. And she had a very peaceful passing, but you know, it's just not easy. We think we're supposed to cure end of life.
Yes.
And that's a burden. That's a huge expectation to put on people. We can't save those final moments. We actually end up robbing the importance of those final moments to be present to. So no easy answers, like you say, so unique, every story, but the toolbox remains the same. We have the tools.
Yeah, and everybody's going to apply them differently. And I always say, really, we're helping to write the final chapters of people's lives. We're not writing them for them. We're helping them, and what a gift it is to be a part of that.
Yes, it truly is an honor.
Mary Jo, you mentioned something about an hour ago I want to go back to.
Sorry, Scott. Okay, it's your turn.
See, Catherine picked up on the jab there. And you mentioned around the tension.
Yes.
And it's something I remember. It was well before I was working in the health and longevity space, but it was something that resonated with me, and it has stayed with me. And it's something that I have learned to get much more comfortable with, and because I understand the value of it now. And so I come from a very non-confrontational family upbringing. You know, very low tension. Life was good. We were very functional. Yeah, we were the only functional family, it turns out, I've discovered. But I think that is a really important point you touched on, because the tension, there is what I think you referred to it as healthy tension, right? is that if there's not healthy tension, I'll let you answer it, is what's the problem if there isn't healthy tension? And that could be both the lack of tension and unhealthy tension. Can you just kind of elaborate on that a little bit more and what it means in the context of your work?
Sure. That is just a loaded conversation for so many people, right? And to answer you is a very big response. So I'll try and boil it down here to more of an applied story. There is a healthy tension there that brings out conversations between parents. But when you are a caregiver for someone you don't even like, or if you're a caregiver for someone that you have had a long history of conflict with, it is just very difficult to come to that center space. And that is where building a village and having professionals surrounding you, not thinking you have to have all the answers and do all the work yourself. I'll give you a little story. Is that okay to share with you?
I love a good story.
Okay. So I had a client one time, a beautiful couple, and the father had Alzheimer's disease and the mother had heart disease, and they were in a senior living, so they weren't in assisted living, but her Alzheimer's disease was getting to a point where it was getting pretty serious, and the doctor called me in to do the navigation for the family along with my partner. And so we stepped into that role, and over a few months period of time identified that within the same facility, it was a continuous care community, that it would be of best service for her based on the doctor's input. The threat to the spouse was significant with the heart disease. So it was suggested that she go into the memory unit. And so we, as a practice at that time, when we dealt with families that had lots of children or lots of moving parts, we always had one spokesperson that came to the table. And so at this point, we were the representatives for the mother who had the heart disease. And so through the process, immediately, all of the children, when it was determined that the power of attorney, the daughter who was the power of attorney, and making the final decisions that the mother would be going into a memory care unit, which is a locked unit. It's a very big decision. She actually did go in, the transition happened, but then within weeks, the mother had to get an attorney, and all 4 siblings to the power of attorney had their own lawyers. And so immediately we were surrounded by an untenable situation of, conflict, and of course causing a lot of stress for the mother with a heart condition. And so I highly recommended that we bring in a mediator, and I'd be happy to take notes and be present, wouldn't participate, but would be there. And it was a beautiful unfolding of watching a family come together, having a space that's safe and a voice that they could each share their opinions. And some of the biggest objectors in the room, it boiled down to just not being able to see their mother this way, having to say goodbye and seeing them in a locked unit, knowing there was no other option, and just needing that space to have a voice. So I think there's a lot of power in that story to tell us those conversations on the front end. The more that we can have those with our children when we're sound of mind about our values and our wants, the more that we can express and have space to say our concerns and our worries are really important. So that tension it can often go awry, but with the right professionals in the room, you can find a pathway back. You're not expected to have all the skill set to do caregiving and mediation all on your own of 5 siblings. I have 5 siblings, including myself, and I know that those conversations are critical so that it doesn't go sideways.
So
Yeah.
Mary Jo, I have 8 siblings,
Oh,
and
gosh, yeah, you know,
I'm not trying to one up or 10. I'm just saying I
No.
understand. Like
you
I
know.
I have helped families for 20 years navigate the decisions, and try to get the conversation started earlier. And truly, to your point, I watch years of family dynamics come to the surface when these types of decisions need to be made. And Scott and I had a conversation a couple months ago. I have helped adult children for 20 years, and I am now the adult child with my parents, and they're divorced. So there's 2 different needs and 2 different personalities and motivations. But I have counseled people to not put their head in the sand for 20 years. And I'm going to admit my head has been in the sand for years, because we're human. And I was realizing I was avoiding the conversations that I have been telling people to have. And that is the benefit of having those conversations early, identifying those. And one thing I really try to stress is plan A and plan B, because even if you have a conversation to understand mom's wishes, which, I think of so many experiences I've had with families just listening to that story, because that goes back to where it's just so common, but we all can't see our parents that way. And we all have this idea of what is best for mom, and I always say an educated decision is the best decision. We haven't taken the time to understand the benefits of memory care, or how that's going to support who mom is now and the needs that mom has. And so in a perfect scenario, what would it look like? Mom would stay with dad and mom would be here. But plan B is when life happens and mom has these needs now. And so again, being able to focus on why we need to make these decisions, but it is, as someone that has done it, I still don't want to do it.
So I have to ask.
I want a mediator.
I have to ask you, Catherine, the elephant in the room, what did you do? What did you do when you realized your head was in the sand and you popped up to think, uh-oh, okay, now what?
Well, the first thing I did was I changed my PowerPoint presentation from the guy with his head in the sand to me with my head in the sand.
That's
No.
great.
But I probably with a few months ago, I just called up my mom, and my mom is the classic, we're not going to talk about it until we absolutely have to talk about it, regardless of what it is. And she is not comfortable talking finances, decisions, healthcare. And probably similar to your siblings, I have some very strong, opinionated siblings. My dad he could be happy anywhere. But I just made a list of everything, every document, every paperwork, everything that we needed to have in place, every conversation that we needed to have to truly understand what was important to my mom, so that when that time came, we as kids, my mom had spelled it out. And the very first thing the 5-hour drive to her house, I'm sitting there angry. Why do I have to be the one to have this conversation? And getting to a place where I was thankful I could have the conversation, be the one to have the conversation. And so my very first words to my mom was, this is going to be difficult, but we're going to get through it. And it was the longest 36 hours, but I had never felt closer to my mom. And I kept telling her, when we're done with this, there's going to be a peace of mind of just knowing that everything is in its place and that you've had the conversation, for both of us and for all of the kids. And, a lot of the siblings were like, you're just trying to control the situation, when really it is a gift to get those things in place. It's a gift to your kids. It's a gift to the siblings, and it doesn't feel like it. But that peace of mind of knowing, even though it's a difficult conversation, there's nothing like it. And my mom, who does not like to have conversations, called me up 3 days later and was so excited. She did a hard decision. And to be able to say, see, mom, you can do hard things. Just the level of confidence. So those tough conversations aren't comfortable, but they are powerful.
Very powerful. Oh my gosh. So beautiful. And that is such a lovely example of what I experience myself and my clients. I often say, you have a choice on your legacy. It can be that intentional legacy that you want to leave behind, or it can be the mess that you left behind that kind of puts everything else great that you did in your life to the side. And having those conversations ahead of time just brings so many gifts that it changes your today. Forget about tomorrow, right? Not forget about it, but I mean, the purpose in doing it is it really changes your life today. It
I love that.
stealing your peace of mind, right? And then all of a sudden tomorrow, the gift just keeps giving because now you've dealt with those hard things. You have choices. Tell me, when you're in a crisis, how many choices do you have? One or two very expensive choices, usually not ones you want, and typically ones that leave you full of regret. And you get to carry that bag around for how long? So really giving yourself that gift now and enjoying it today and having your peace of mind today. Wow. Wow. That is what planning is. Planning is such a boring, dreadful word. And that is it.
I want
Scott's
to
raising his hand.
I want to put the book up here so that people can see it. And you've mentioned the 6 pillars, and I think there's an element of the 6 pillars that are serving a purpose. And I put this up because this is the new one. I'm not sure. I've got an advanced copy that your publisher graciously sent on to me, but hopefully when this airs, it'll be available so people recognize it. You mentioned the 6 pillars. So I'll ask you what those are, but also recognizing in the context of we're not actually leaping. That's what the conversations revolve around, right? Because the obvious question is, so what should we talk about? So can you just kind of just give us the Cole's notes on the 6 pillars?
Okay. Well, I briefly mentioned before, they are spirituality, they are your home environment, legal and financial, and then you have social and medical. And as you know, these are all the systems that surround us, and any one of them is huge and could be a 3-day workshop, right? So within each one of these, you have conversations that lead to making practical decisions about things that you can do today. But it also highlights in many areas, in the social area, for example, we know scientifically now that your social connections are part of what builds your resilience. Your purpose is part of what builds your resilience. And then, of course, in spirituality, that meaning and fulfillment builds your resilience. And so resilience is a muscle. We don't just come into the world with it in an intellectual sense. We instinctively do. We know how to get back up and try again. But as we get older, that story of decline and our bodies changing and what society is telling us makes us more and more invisible. And we start to lose our voice and we start to lose our autonomy. And so I think the baby boomers are quickly changing that and standing up, right? And standing for what they believe in. And so within each one of these pillars, as it unlocks the practical aspects of steps that you can take to have the peace of mind that Catherine is talking about, it's also unlocking those areas for you to share with your family, for you to be able to share with your friends and have connections in a different way. So it can be self-motivated in how you approach moving through the world, as well as how you approach, like Catherine said, this is going to be a difficult conversation. There'll be lots of tips. There'll be lots of areas that will have professional support for you to figure out the best way to approach conversations about, giving up the keys, or conversations about staying at home and having someone else clean the gutters versus you getting up on that ladder, even though you're more than capable,
Exactly.
right? Just some
Yeah.
things you shouldn't be doing. So each one of these pillars will help you understand the language as well as the professionals within that can kind of guide you and help you, that you can turn to either through their books or their associations or their tips and techniques to help make the path easier. And then at the end of the day, there's many aspects of the conversation project, of Catherine's work for unlocking conversations. And Scott, even the work that you are doing within the home environment, talking about, think about your home. And if you're a person who wants to die at home, that's a very common thought that older individuals start to have. Where do I want to die? And you're not talking to people about it. Well, if you want to die at home, do you want to be in a room where there's no windows and it's dark? Or do you want to have a great big space available for you to be able to see out into the world? And even if it's not your deathbed and it's not that extreme, let's say you have a broken hip and you're recovering from surgery, a hip replacement or pneumonia even. What kind of environment do you want to heal in? Do you want to have a big window somewhere that you can see out in the world and still connect? So in any pillar, you are going to find ways to question yourself, to bring forth what you think is important to you, and then how to share it. Because if your loved ones, your friends and family don't know your values, what's on your legal paperwork is very black and white, and life is gray. And so the more they understand about those values through conversation, the better decisions they can make for you when you can't for yourself. And then the more motivation they will have to understand you when you're making the decisions you're making as you're getting older. So
you mentioned the word autonomy a lot, and I appreciate that. I hear a lot, I'm afraid of losing my independence, and I'm sure you've heard that. I mean, we just say it without thinking it sometimes. I'm afraid of losing my independence. And I've realized over the years, I don't know that it's as much independence as it is identity, is that I'm afraid of losing my identity, especially in moving to a group home. I would say just a community setting versus your home, and your home is representative of who you are and the life that you've lived. And I had this conversation with my mother, and I had said she does not want to talk finances. And my mother's in a situation where all of us kids are helping support her. And when I asked her why that was difficult for her to discuss, she is a very religious person, and she has always paid her tithing for 83 years. And so she was afraid that I was going to say, because we're on this budget, that isn't a necessity. And I said, Mom, I'm not here to change your belief set or how you've believed or what you define as, your spirituality of 83 years. I just need to understand. But that was her fear. It had nothing to do with the money, is that I was going to take that away from her. And so to your point, it typically goes back to a spiritual level.
Well, and it's those nuggets. It's those nuggets. You think you know a person, you make a lot of assumptions. And the first thing we can do as caregivers, as adult children, is to ask, right? Just to ask what is important? Why is that happening? What is behind this? And of course, maybe they're not that direct, but to your point, getting into that conversation of the values and understanding, what was important to her and what was really bubbling up. And what a beautiful example of something that can be honored and lovely and doesn't interfere with giving her the best care possible.
Yeah. As you're both talking about that, I'm also remembering how often I find myself playing marriage counselor to people who've been married for 50 or 60 years.
Yes.
And it's not that they're contemplating divorce or separation necessarily, although separation for a different reason. but you do start to realize these issues come up. It isn't always between adult children and their parents, right? It can be between adults when they're starting to get, an age of they're seeing their parents and they're realizing, hold on, my values are different than yours. We were all centered on the kids, and now we've got these other views of what the second half or the third of my life, or the third might look like. So it just all keeps keeps circling back to say, these are such great conversations. They really are. And I think Catherine's example is a great one. Every time, like we talk about doing a will, like, how do you feel when it's like, no one wants to go in and do it, right? We don't go, let's go do a new one, because that was so much fun 5 years ago. But every time you come out, you feel like you've kind of cleansed, going back to the spiritual aspect, you feel like you've cleansed a number of things. You've dropped a bunch of bags that just were kind of, I didn't know whether, what I'd done the last time, and what, my, family situations change, whether it's the will or whatever it is, it still comes back to the same experience. And everyone says, that was really good. I'm really glad I did that. And that's the empowerment, which I think you went back to right at the start, was this: as you do these things early, you feel empowered going forward. So it is a today experience we're talking about here. This isn't I should do it one day when it matters, but because when one day matters, it's one day too late.
Yeah.
Probably,
I think the important aspect of what you're bringing up, Scott, is the fact that it's like identifying your purpose, right? That one big thing that we all are meant to do in the world. Well, you're never going to get there if you go after that question. It has to be chunked down. It's the same thing with your legal paperwork, right? People have to decide who's going to get their children if they're in a car accident and they both die. I mean, what a horrific decision.
Right, right.
You don't make the decision. It's the same kind of situation. You go into a good elder law attorney, they're not going to just say, hey, what do you want on your paperwork? Either someone who does the work that Catherine does, or you do, Scott, or I do, they're going to take you through a series of soul-searching questions to kind of help navigate you for the moment. And then you can change your paperwork 3 months later if you want, 3 years later, 30 years later, whatever it is. We advise that you do a checkup, a legal checkup every year. There's a lot of nuances there that people don't know, like your beneficiary overrides your will. And so you always want to make sure you're checking both of these things. But that will can be updated at any time. It is a living document. And so giving it too much weight that it paralyzes you, is going to wreak havoc on your legacy that you're leaving your family. Probate and state decisions are not what you want. Family fighting, all of these things emerge when we just don't grapple with those harder conversations. And ultimately having that paperwork that is going to protect your wishes when you can't speak for yourself. The home environment, you were pointing out that, you become a marriage counselor. Just to touch back on that, that is the pillar. That is the one that can take partners, a couple, anyone, and just bring them to their knees, because it's the area where they both have to decide on a living environment, and it's so emotionally charged. Paperwork for legal is the same, in the sense that it may not be the contention for a marriage, but it is the contention with your own conscience. And it's just so easy to be paralyzed. You're not a bad person because you can't make these decisions. You just, again, you need that professional to help you kind of ease over those rough spots and help you get to the best decision for today. And that's going to give you so many more choices in the future that you'll be really grateful for.
Scott, you just mentioned like that we get so focused on kids or career or different things that when we actually have to focus on what's important to us now at this stage in our life, you really do see different values. And one of the things I've realized over the years is the mindset. And so you could take a couple like you work with, Scott, and if one person's decision and their mindset is about practicality and what makes sense financially, where the other spouse is, their mindset is about social and engagement and taking advantage of every opportunity that I have, that home environment might not be what they envision as the home for that stage in their life. And so if you don't have that conversation and the marriage counseling session with Scott, you're not going to really understand, again, the motivating reasons, because we all think it's a simple answer of we want to stay here or we want this, but being able to have that conversation. And I hear kids or adults say, I don't want to burden my kids. Well, it's a burden to your kids if you haven't made your wishes known, because then they're scrambling, trying to figure it out. So I say burden your kids to sit down and have the conversation, so you're not burdening them with, to your point, Mary Jo, probate and all of these different things that could have been avoided.
Catherine, I would love to piggyback on a thought there that you introduced, and that is, during the process of looking at that conversation that you're having and understanding around the home, oftentimes, and Scott, you probably know this better than anyone, oftentimes when you're dealing with those dreams for the future and what that's going to look like, when we're trying to stay in a growth mentality and mindset, there's a little spiritual aspect back here nibbling away that if I move there, that means I'm in decline. If I move there, that means, I can't dream anymore, or there goes that bucket list item. I know I've always wanted to live on a boat for a year. I don't know.
Fun.
It's just something I've always wanted to do. Well, my husband, bless his heart, he gets horrible motion sickness just watching a boat on land. Yeah. So this is not on the list, right? But what I told him was, well, I'd love to live, a year in 3 different countries, just to experience the cultures and how they do aging and living and thriving and growth mindset within their countries. And so having those opportunities to think about, what is it in the conversation that you're having? What is it that you really want? Is it not about the house? Is it something other, again, that's deeper? Is there a little nugget there we need to pull to the front and make it part of your planning? Make it part of your plan to live in a country 1 year in 3 different countries, or whatever that bucket list or dream might be, so that it doesn't indicate to you, oh, I'm in decline. If I move into assisted living or a senior living environment with all these amenities and all these wonderful support systems, it doesn't mean that I'm not thriving. I can now lock and leave and go have a ball, right?
Yeah.
So how do you change those mindsets is huge, huge.
Well, and I think even just the conversation of, why do you feel that you're going to lose that? Because the preconceived ideas, or what their friends experienced, or what their parents experienced, or whatever it is, to your point, there's probably something else that's that nugget under there that's speaking to that. That's just the easy common thing to say, but really, what is it that, when people say I don't want to lose my independence, define what independence means to you, because it's a blanket statement, but it is, for you, it's being able to go live in a country, 3 countries in a year. And for your husband, it's to not have to look at a boat and get sick. I mean, it's different. And so that question to understand the individual, I just think is, and we all want to be seen as an individual.
The example that comes to mind is a career change. Right? Lots of people are going through a pivot of something that, whether it's changing jobs or changing careers entirely, there's that fear of giving up the known and the security associated with that. And so you'll hang on until you're driven to the point of, I just can't bear it any longer, for some people, versus if we all know if you do it right, there's a better opportunity that's waiting for you. And it's the same, I think we talk about. If you take that same approach, you just need to open a few more doors and kind of what you're talking about, like to look in and experience some other things, to find out it's okay to put your handle on the door, and it's okay to open it and look inside and close the door. It's okay to step inside and look around. It's okay to do it for a month, a year, whatever. Like you can look at people who, the location is a big part, right? Do I want to go live where my grandchildren are? Well, maybe you want to do that for a period of time. That doesn't mean it's a forever decision. It might work out really well because you discover all these other things you like about it. The grandchildren are growing up and have their own careers. It's that really, I think, where you're getting at is this looking forward and looking beyond it. There is, like, I get to see, and that's what I try to share with people, is so many people who live full, really long, really rich lives. They never stop looking forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, at 100, life will slow down, but it's not stopping. It's still coming at them. It's still, life is still coming to them because they're putting themselves out there. And, if whatever age people are at, there's no time to put your foot on the brake. It doesn't have to be full on the accelerator, but there's lots forward in life for those who are just willing to do it. So with that, I think we should probably wrap this up. Let everybody get back to what they were planning to do before we hijack them with this amazing conversation with Mary Jo. But Mary Jo, I just want to thank you for the really, really important work that you do. I want to thank you for allowing me to be part of your book, Eldercare 101, the updated edition. It's going to be available where?
July 19th. It's already available on Amazon as a pre-order. So pop in there and take a look. Yeah.
Great.
Well, congratulations. That is exciting and can't wait to read it. And, Scott had mentioned that I would enjoy speaking with you and just getting to know about your work and you, and truly have enjoyed this conversation and could talk to you all day long.
Oh, Catherine, soul connections for sure. Yes. And I definitely have one of those with Scott. So it's wonderful to be in a room with such compassionate individuals as yourself, so innovative and definitely oriented around those family conversations, around those solo agers, all of the challenges that we all face. So such an honor to be with both of you today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you both for changing the world for the better.
Thanks for allowing us to be a part of changing the world with you, Scott.
Yes. Thank you, Scott, for your contributions.
Okay. Take care.
Take good care.
Have a great day.
Be well.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode of Tattered Capes. To learn more about the show, visit tatteredcapes.com and subscribe on your favorite platform. Until then, stay curious and remember, the superhero in all of us has a lot more resilient living to do. See you on the next show.